Due to the Juneteenth holiday, today there will be no noon news, and instead we're going to bring you a half-hour program featuring an in-depth look at one of Vermont's most vital venues for Black history, arts, and economic empowerment, Clemmons Family Farm. We want to begin by introducing Lydia Clemmons, the president and executive director of the Clemmons Family Farm. Welcome.
Hi, good morning.
We're so happy to have you.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here.
First, can you tell me about the farm and how your family came to Vermont?
Sure. So what is now known as the Clemmons Farm was originally, of course, on the land of the Abenaki people. And sometime in the late 1700s to early 1800s, white settlers came and established the farm. They built several farm buildings, the main house, cow barns, hay barns, a carriage barn, blacksmith shop. And for over 200 years, that farm was held by different families, farming families. It started in the, as I said, late 1700s with the Stone family and the McNeil family. And the McNeils operated the first ferry between Vermont and New York, Charlotte to Essex. And what the town of Charlotte records show is that over those 200 and so years, the farm kept changing hands from family to family. A family might own it for 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, and it kept going like that, family to family, owner to owner, a lot of frequent turnover until 1962, when my parents purchased the property. And according to the town records, my family, an African American family, owned the farm the longest, 61 consecutive years, until they sold the farm last year to the nonprofit named in my parents' honor, Clemmons Family Farm, Inc. And what's kind of remarkable about that is that over those 61 years, while my family was holding on to that land, Black people were losing land all over the place. And lose is a bit of a euphemism. Land was stolen, land was taken from Black people around the country. And we went from owning collectively 44 million acres to just 3.8 million acres today across the US. And this Clemmons Farm is now one of just 0.4% of all farms in the nation that are still held by Black people. So my parents arrived in Vermont in 1962 from Cleveland. My dad had a job offer at the University of Vermont in pediatric pathology, so he worked as a lab technician, a pathologist at UVM, and also he was the second Black member of faculty at UVM. Apparently the first Black member of faculty left the same day he arrived. My mother, during the first 10 years we were in Vermont, stayed home to raise 5 kids, and then she too returned to her profession of nursing at the University of Vermont Medical Center, where she was the first Black nurse anesthetist and president of the New England Association of Nurse Anesthetists. So in addition to being a doctor and a nurse, my parents were farmers, and our entire family raised the food that we ate. We were a family subsistence farm. And we also had one commercial crop that was hay.
And of course, we're going to talk a lot about the history of the Clemmons Family Farm over this program, but as the executive director, we'd love to ask what you see for the future.
Well, since the Clemmons Family Farm nonprofit purchased the farm last year, our real focus is really holding on to that farm as a legacy of African American heritage, and also as a center for the community to come together and learn about the remarkable history, art, and culture of Black people. And so the farm serves as an economic platform for Vermont's Black artists and farmers and scholars, and also as a place to really bring people together. We are and will continue to hold K through 12 field visits, beautiful community programs, tours, artist residencies, and more. So the future is really a center. We're going to be nominated as a place in the National Registry of Historic Places. So this is really a major landmark for Vermont and the nation as probably one of the largest African American heritage centers in the country, right here in Charlotte, Vermont.
The phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," originated as an African proverb, and the meaning conveys the importance of safety, health, and security. This concept extends to communities as well. Our first guest from an organization that helps build Clemmons Family Farm's legacy is Stacy Fagan, Vice President for Philanthropy with the Vermont Community Foundation. Can you first just tell us what the Vermont Community Foundation is?
Yes, of course. The Community Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've been around Vermont since 1986. We do many things, but one of the most important roles we play is bringing together people with charitable resources and intent to make a difference in Vermont, to help them find and fund causes that are important to them and to the communities in which they live.
And I understand that VCF was one of the funders who helped purchase the Clemmons Family Farm. Can you tell why they did that?
Yes, of course. You know, I would also just start out by saying, in this context, VCF is, you know, we are a family of funds and funders, some of whom your watchers will know as the McClure Foundation, the Vermont Women's Fund, the Northeast Kingdom Fund, the Samara Fund. But we are really a family of funds and funders, so many, many individuals, businesses, nonprofits who all come together through the Community Foundation. So in this context, VCF is a number of funders who came together really because, for really two important reasons. Because they saw the vision of Dr. Clemmons, Dr. and Mrs. Clemmons, and they see what Lydia has been trying to create. And they thought they could make a difference by coming together at this moment, seeing the community opportunity and the need to preserve Black culture, to see it as a hub of art, music, food, and the heritage of place. And so they believe they could make a difference, first and foremost, with their charitable dollars. It's also important to note that our funders were not the only ones. And so there are many others that participated outside of the funders at VCF. And so just want to acknowledge them also, who they're not here in this room or in the conversation necessarily, but they are to be acknowledged for their leadership.
All right, absolutely. And Lydia, the farm recently held a concert. Can you tell us a little about that?
It was magical. It was a classical music concert funded in part by Vermont Community Foundation, and what was magical about it is that it presented Black composers from 3 continents, the US, Europe, and Africa. And we had 3 fantastic Black musicians, a voice soprano, Brenda Marie Turner, a kora music player. Kora is a West African harp, John Hughes, who's a Vermonter, and then a pianist, Kyle Walker. And it was gorgeous. I was telling the audience, there were 75 members in the audience, and I was telling them, be careful, you're sitting under a tent. When you start levitating with the music, don't knock your head against the tent. And it was that beautiful. I mean, people were just transported. And I think, again, just helping people shift their mindsets about what is classical music. And oh my God, Black people have a role in classical music. And classical music can be something that's informal, friendly, in a beautiful outdoor environment that anybody, even people who think I don't like classical music, can actually love, understand, and connect with. It was a fantastic concert.
And as Lydia mentioned, this was partially funded by VCF. Can you tell me why you decided to help pitch in for this?
Sure. Well, I should say that the funding came from something called the Concert Artists Fund, which is in a permanently endowed fund, left to the foundation to steward in perpetuity by somebody who cared very deeply about arts and music. And we were given the opportunity to steward those resources over time. And the work that the container that Lydia is creating at the farm to celebrate Black culture and music is so important. We couldn't think of a better place to utilize those resources in present day.
Lydia, you're going to stay on set with us and serve as my co-host as we bring in our next guest, who has worked to preserve some of the historic buildings on the property. Devin Coleman is the Vermont State Architectural Historian. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we talked with Lydia about the family history, but can you tell me why the Clemmons Family Farm is so important to you?
Sure. The Clemmons Family Farm is important on a number of different levels, and it's really exciting when properties have multiple areas of significance. And on the one hand, the Clemmons Family Farm is this classic Vermont farmstead with a beautiful farmhouse, beautiful agricultural lands, a nice collection of barns, and it can teach us about the history of Vermont agriculture, about architectural styles in the early 19th century, building traditions, how barns were used and adapted over the centuries. And that's really important information, but that's not the whole story at the Clemmons Family Farm. There's also this additional layer of cultural history and social history starting in 1962 with Dr. Clemmons purchasing the property. And so to have this classic Vermont farmstead with an overlay of African American heritage is really special. And that's what really, I think, gets people excited about this project.
And can you tell me the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in historical preservation?
It's definitely something that the historic preservation field, like so many other disciplines, has been grappling with in recent years for good reason. And it has caused us as practitioners to really take a hard look at what are the gaps in the historical narrative, what stories have been overlooked, and what underrepresented communities need to have a little more attention to bring their stories to light. And I think the Clemmons Family Farm is a great example where in the past it probably would have been documented as a 19th century Vermont farmstead, period. And today, we take a much broader look, looking at cultural history, social history, ethnic history, and not just at the pretty buildings, which are great, but they're not the full story of a property like this. So it's definitely, moving forward, the historic preservation community is looking at our methodologies and practice methods to ensure that everyone's story is being told, and we're really preserving the full scope of American history.
And there are two main projects to this. There's the big barn and the main house. Can you tell me how those buildings are being preserved?
Yes, so I know Lydia got a kick out of watching me crawl on my belly through the attic of the main house and through a little opening in the roof into the top of the L. And part of what we do as architectural historians is look for that physical evidence of a building's history. And in this case, we found a section of roof that was enclosed under the roof of the L, the original roofing shingles from the 1820s. And we were able to extract some nails from those shingles. And in looking at those nails, they're a type of machine-cut nail that was manufactured in the 1820s, 1830s. So we know that that roof was put on in circa 1820. And that physical information combined with the historic record and the property research, the deed research, which also goes back to the early 1820s. We can start piecing together a narrative of the history of that building. And we're starting to arrive at a conclusion that it does date from probably the early to mid 1820s. And whether the history of the farmstead goes back before that is to be determined. But we know that the house was built in that period. And then the barns also, looking at their construction, they're all hand-hewn. Mortise and tenon connections for the timber framing, and figuring out that the barn originally was what we know as an English barn, which also dates from the early 19th century, so that lines up with the house. But it's been moved and adapted into a new style of barn, so we're starting to piece together these little bits of information from the physical record and the historic record to figure out the history of the property.
And Lydia, you mentioned in our last interview how important it is to kind of keep the utility of the barn and keep it like a working property. Can you tell me why that's so important?
Well, I think it's really important for everybody to understand that history isn't just something that happened a long time ago and it's over and done. History is even happening today. And one of the wonderful things about the farm is it is living history. It was owned for 61 consecutive years by my parents, an African American couple, at a time when African Americans nationwide were drastically losing land to racial discrimination. So to be able to hold on to the same farm for 61 consecutive years and then intentionally sell it to a Black-led nonprofit for the purpose of continuing African American heritage, legacy, and having a place where everybody, regardless of race or culture, can come together to learn about African American history is part of the big importance of this farm. The big barn will become an African diaspora visual and performing arts center, and the main house will become an African diaspora culinary arts institute. So we're really excited to blend the past with the present and with great hopes for the future.
All right, and a little later in our program, we're going to dive into some details on that. But Devin, first of all, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And in Vermont, we're fond of talking about the working landscape, which means farms, forests, and financial sustainability. Stacy Sibula of Vermont Housing and Conservation Board joins us now.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
And we've already talked a lot about the Clemmons Farm, but can you tell us a little bit why your organization decided to work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, just would love to give you a little bit of background on Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So we are a quasi-public organization that, as our name suggests, supports both affordable housing and land conservation. And it's really great when we have projects like this where there's that intersection. And specifically with this project, when Lydia reached out to us and one of our partners, Vermont Land Trust, about wanting to conserve the farm, we were able to put together some grant funding to help make that a reality. And we'll talk more in a moment about what that looks like, but basically it's funding a conservation easement on the property, which makes sure the land will always stay a farm and we'll be able to continue to do the great work that you all are doing there.
And what does the easement mean for the property?
Yeah, so the way to think about it, it's basically a permanent deed restriction on the property. So the Clemmons Family Farm still continues to own the property and can use it for farming and forestry and recreation. It's just basically saying you can't subdivide and develop it for like residential uses or like commercial uses, things of that nature. So for an organization like this, where it really aligns with what they're already doing, it's like a win-win situation. And I think for us, what was really compelling about this project is that, we do a lot of work with different kinds of farm operations, and this one really stands out because it's more than just a farm. It's, really a multicultural community center where they're bringing in groups of kids to learn about African American history and arts. And so for us, a really cool aspect of this project is making sure that those uses can continue on the property and that they're protected forever.
And one of the things you just mentioned was the affordable housing, and this is a question for both of you, but Stacy, let's start with you. How does affordable housing kind of fit into that framework?
Yeah, so certainly at Vermont Housing Conservation Board, a big part of what we do is fund organizations who are doing large-scale affordable housing projects, but also with a project like this, where they're a working farm. This particular project is going to make sure that farm workers in the future have a place to live, employees of the organization can live on the property, and when the property changes hands, it's going to be sold at its agricultural value. And so that's a way that affordability is always going to be a part of this project. And I think you had more to say about like the plans that you have for really working through that on the property?
Yeah, well, we're really hoping to partner with Black farmers. We're already partnering with a network of over 300 Black artists, all Vermonters. And as Stacy was saying, having folks live on the property so that they can be closer to the land and to the work that they're doing in collaboration with us makes great sense. We have about 8 acres set aside. We will be working with experts to figure out the best design and how to implement that affordable housing development for folks who are affiliated with the farm. So it's really an exciting opportunity. And I wanted to also say that the easement makes perfect sense for this nonprofit, and it's also part of my parents' vision. They never wanted to see this beautiful farm subdivided or developed in any kind of way. They always wanted to keep it for the African American heritage legacy. So the easement is a wonderful solution to make sure that that happens.
And quickly, you mentioned the farming component of it. What kind of farming are we talking about? Is it dairy farming, vegetable farming?
Mostly vegetable, and again, we're really trying to tie it to the African diaspora. So teff, for example, is an Ethiopian indigenous grain that grows beautifully in Vermont. It is iron-rich, gluten-free, and just like most any other kind of grain, you can grind it up into flour and create anything. In Ethiopia, teff is used for Ethiopian bread called injera, but it can also be used for pancakes or muffins or anything you want. And so we're hoping teff and other horticulture tied to the African diaspora, okra, sweet potatoes, collard greens, and so on, will be grown on the farm and feed into our culinary arts programming.
And can you tell me about the Iris program that you guys are doing right now?
Oh yeah, so it's the month of June, it's a beautiful month, and the wild irises are perennials. They grow every year on the farm around this time. And so like everything else we do, we integrate the beautiful place and nature with our arts. So we have a program, a free community program called creating in the company of wild irises. And one of our collaborating artists, it might be a visual artist or a poet or a musician, will walk with program participants to visit the wild irises, get inspired, and then create some beautiful art, music, painting, poetry, drawings. And so we were rained out last weekend, but hopefully this coming weekend and future weekends in June, we'll be holding the Creating in the Company of Wild Irises program for community members.
One of the goals of the Clemmons Family Farm is to build upon the work they've done to establish African American artists, culture, and perfect for this time of day, cuisine to Vermont. I'd like to welcome Harmony Idosamwan to our program. Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
We're happy to have you. I'm doing great.
Great.
And you brought in you said this was honey glazed cornbread.
Yes.
Can you tell me what you make? What's on the menu?
Yeah, so Harmony's Kitchen is an Afrofusion soul food business. We specialize in soul food, Southern food, and Nigerian cuisines as well. Some of our popular menu items are fried chicken, honey glazed cornbread, like you see here, and our baked mac and cheese.
And you've catered several events with the Clemmons Family Farm. Can you
Yes.
tell me about your experience with them?
Yeah, you know, working with the farm has always been a pleasure. The farm was actually one of the first people to hire me as an artist. Yeah, so we've done many events. Adventure by Disney, where I was able to cater for groups of people coming from all over the country. They came to the farm and they had my cuisine, and that was just, pleasurable experience for myself. We had another experience where I had the opportunity to teach some young high school student girls how to cook Nigerian food on the farm, which was also such a fulfilling experience for me as well. Apart from culinary aspects, I've also done some work with the farm through my poetry. I'm a poet as well. So yeah, we've done plenty of events like that. I've done some consultancy work through that. But recently, I'm actually was just hired as a kitchen design consultant for the farm, and I will be helping to design the Authentica house kitchen on the farm, where residents will be able to, stay and enjoy the pleasures of the farm, and really dive deep into their artwork.
And
Yeah.
if somebody sees this at home and their mouth is watering just as much as mine is, maybe how can they try your food?
Yeah, so we offer weekly takeout every Sunday. I operate on a pre-order basis. We also do catering of all events, weddings, to small events, bigger events. So yeah, feel free to check me out on harmonyskitchenvt.com and also on all social medias with the same handle.
All right, great.
Thank you.
And Lydia, you obviously have a full plate, if you don't mind my my pun. Why add culinary arts to that at the Clemmons Family Farm?
Well, because it's so delicious, and food, of course, has a way of bringing people together. Part of our mission is to identify, mobilize, and support African diaspora artists in Vermont, including people like Harmony with her amazing culinary arts. And again, food brings people together. It's a way for folks to enjoy the cuisine, learn about the cultures of the African diaspora, where the food comes from, and also it connects to other programs. They'll be in a historic building. They'll be eating food grown from the farm through our agricultural programming. And if they want to take a walk, they can take a walk in the conserved land and forest.
Exactly.
So food is really the center, really, of all of this, and my selfish interest as well. So.
And we've talked about the focus on preservation with a lot of the changes you've made. Is the addition of the culinary kind of center going to follow the same trajectory?
It is. So for the big barn, a few years ago, we had the wonderful architect Zena Howard, who designed the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, that beautiful building on the mall. She was at the farm to help us think about the future design of the big barn. It's a historic building, so we won't do a lot of changes, but light touches to really help that big barn serve the purpose of a visual and performing arts center. We invited architects and artists to come and look at that barn and dream together. We're going to do the same process with the main house, which will become the African Diaspora Culinary Arts Institute. And so Harmony and about 30 other culinary artists who are in our network will join architects and hopefully Zena Howard again to walk through that whole beautiful main house and start thinking about how to redesign that to suit the culinary arts. Just before we got onto this program, we were talking about this wonderful set here at WCAX and how it would be cool if the Culinary Arts Institute could include a set for cooking shows.
Yes.
So for Harmony's Kitchen cooking show, for example, and as well as Professional Chef's Kitchen, a beautiful place to sit, inside and outside, sit, eat food, commune together, and learn about the cultures of the African diaspora while tasting the foods.
Sure, so sharing it, I mean, amongst people coming to the farm and also to the world at large more so.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
Harmony, can you tell me what it means to have this kind of resource available to you?
Yeah, I mean, it just means the world to me. Like I said, the farm was one of the first people to hire me as an artist, and the farm, from the very beginning, they tell us, like, we have value as artists. You know, we should carry ourselves that way, and we should also expect that. So when it comes to advocating for fair wages when we're being outsourced, when it comes to just, you know, giving us all these different opportunities and broadening our span of work, the farm has always been a part of that. And just having a space that, you know, focuses on Black culture, African diaspora culture, in one of the whitest states in the country, it's so imperative. So I'm entirely grateful for the farm, for Lydia. And yeah, I think many Black artists here can truly thank the Clemmons Family Farm for honestly giving a lot of us some of our first starts and helping to deepen and nurture our careers here in Vermont.
All right, Harmony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Lydia, of course, thank you for helping us organize this and bring in so many people so we can learn about the Clemmons Family Farm.
My pleasure.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To learn more about anything we talked about on today's program, visit the Clemmons Family Farm at clemmonsfamilyfarm.org on the web. Or you can leave a message at 765-560-5445. And my thanks to the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX who makes this program possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one and happy Juneteenth.